Welcome to the Resilience series. I'm Stephanie Weaver, the author of the Migraine Relief Plan and the upcoming Migraine Relief Plan cookbook. I'm interviewing a variety of people about the topic of resilience and living well with a chronic condition. My guests today are Hart Schafer and Kerrie Smyres. Hart is the founder and CEO of TheraSpecs, which he originally created for his wife, Kerrie Smyres, who has chronic migraine. Kerrie is a patient advocate and writer whose work can be found at thedailyheadacheandmigraine.com. Welcome, Hart and Kerrie.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so glad to have you both here. So tell us briefly about each of your backgrounds with migraine, and Hart, why don't you go first?
Oh, sure. So I have classic migraine episodic with aura. Had my first migraine when I was 13 and didn't know what was going on. And it is come and gone from, I could go months between having them. Then actually during the pandemic, I was to the point where I was getting one or two every weekend for several months. Pretty well controlled at this point, but gives me a lot of perspective on what everybody else is going through, just to have even some of them, which has been helpful.
And Kerrie, how about you?
So I have chronic migraine. I've been chronic since I was 11, and I was diagnosed when I was 25. At the time, doctors were looking for basically Hart's experience with migraine, and I have pain on both sides. I don't have a visual aura. I don't vomit. And so it took a long time to get diagnosed. And it was, in fact, I just had these headaches, these bad headaches, and I didn't take them. I mean, I took them seriously, but my doctors didn't pay them mind. And it wasn't until Hart and I were married and I saw his experience with migraine that I started pushing for more treatment and finally got diagnosed.
Yeah, thank you. And just so people watching know, like, not everybody gets aura. So I don't have aura. I wasn't diagnosed till I was 53. So I had what I thought were weather headaches. And it wasn't until I started having new symptoms of vertigo that I was actually diagnosed. So one of the reasons why I wrote the book was because there was so much information that didn't seem like it was in one place to help people really understand what they were experiencing and get the help that we all need. So thank you for sharing that.
And it's interesting, I actually never thought that so I only recently discovered or realized that I was having some migraine without aura. In fact, I had one this past weekend where it was following a completely different pattern, but I'm sure that some of the headaches that I've had in the past were that, but I actually have both, and that was a very new experience for me.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, the pattern can change. So, as we age, hormonal fluctuations can affect it. I think mine were related to menopause, and I was on the pill for most of my adult life. So my hormones were pretty level. And it wasn't until I went through menopause that that I had some new symptoms. And I had no idea that vertigo could be a symptom of migraine. I had no idea that sinus headaches, or 90% of them, are actually undiagnosed migraine. So that's part of what the purpose of, being out there and being advocates, obviously, is part of our goal is to help people understand, what maybe they're experiencing. And so, that's a great segue into TheraSpecs, because one of the things that I had no idea was that my light sensitivity was a symptom of migraine. And I have been light sensitive my whole life. Yeah. I kind of joke that I'm kind of a mole woman, and the fact that I'm also sun sensitive, I'm like the whitest white person around. For me, it's like, it's always been easy to avoid, because, it's like, well, I just don't go by the pool. And but I had no idea that could be a trigger. So tell us about TheraSpecs and explain what it is and explain how you decided to start the company.
Sure. Well, so TheraSpecs are glasses with precision tinted lenses that specifically filter out the wavelengths of light that are most likely to cause pain or trigger symptoms for people with conditions like migraine. Kerrie's wearing a pair now. And
I wear them every time I'm in front of a computer.
Yes. They're very fetching too, very stylish.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we've been working a lot on different styles and things. So The company came from an experience where we went to see Kerrie's headache specialist at the Mayo Clinic, and she was wearing sunglasses at the time for obvious reasons. She's in the middle of an attack. And the doctor said during the appointment, well, I totally know why you're wearing sunglasses, but you should know that wearing sunglasses indoors can actually make you more sensitive to light over time. And so it's something you should avoid. And he was the first one who told us that these kinds of lenses could exist. And so we did a bunch of research and tried to get them, and finally found a pair and got them and tried them. And we thought that the lenses were helpful, but they let in a lot of light from around the sides, and the frames were kind of cheap. And I remember thinking, I don't know anything about making glasses, but I could do better than that. And really just started with couple pair of wraparound glasses that I made for Kerrie, and her feedback was really positive, and so we made a few more for some people that she knew through her advocacy work, and the feedback we got was just outstanding. People really loved them, and I thought, well, I don't know that anybody else is going to do this right, so let's go ahead and try to make this a company, and I've been working on it since.
And how many years has the company been around?
Well, we sold our first pair in April 2012. So,
Oh, okay.
8 years now, 8.5 years.
Great. So that's exciting. And I do have a pair of one of your competitors. So there are several companies. So this isn't a, product video, but it was revelatory for me to find out that there was something that could help. And I wear them every airport, every hotel ballroom, because every conference is always in a place with horrible lighting. I wear them to the doctor's office because doctor's offices, even my migraine specialist office, has horrible lighting. And it's just very helpful. It's one of the kind of tools in my toolkit. So that's really great to know about. And it's also great to know why you started the company, and that it really is a labor of love and of service to other people. So Kerrie, tell us about your advocacy work is different and separate from TheraSpecs. I would describe TheraSpecs as a form of advocacy, because creating a product that helps other patients is most assuredly advocacy. But you see yourself, even though you're part of the company, your work is separate. Tell us about that.
So I started my blog, The Daily Headache, in 2005, and I had to quit work because the migraine attacks were so bad. I just wasn't able to keep working. And Hart had said, why don't you start a blog? And I said, no, I don't want to start a blog. And like a year and a half later, I said, oh, I've got this great idea. I should start a blog. So it first went live in 2005, and it was really just a way to share the research that I'd been doing, the things that I'd been thinking about living with migraine. And I didn't expect it to blossom into more advocacy work. So I also write for migraine.com. I volunteer with a variety of nonprofits. I'm part of CHAMP, the Coalition for Headache and Migraine Patients. I've done Headache on the Hill. So I think of myself primarily as a writer, but through that writing, I advocate for people with migraine, both for those in their lives to better understand them, and also for the people with migraine to better understand how to cope with migraine and live well with it. Because I talk about two aspects of migraine that are equally important. There are the physical symptoms, which we go to the doctor to treat, and then there's the emotional component, which I think is just as important to manage. And it's not something that people necessarily think about needing to manage or have the resources available to manage. And so that's the heart of my work, is helping people learn how to cope with the emotional experience of living with migraine.
Sure. And you were one of the first people that I read when I was finally told that I had migraine. Like everybody, I think you go online and you start searching, and so certainly I've read your work, and it was very helpful to find migraine.com and your blog and some of the other bloggers that are out there who do write about it. And certainly, having a face to an invisible illness is really important, because most of the time we look just totally fine. And so some of the advocacy things you mentioned, if anybody's interested in those, Katie Golden, the interview with Katie Golden, she talked in more detail about some of those things. So you can learn more by watching Katie's interview as well. So what role do you think resilience plays in migraine wellness? And I'll have Hart go first, and then Kerrie, you can go second.
Right. Well, there are so many things about that, but I really think of it as boiling down to both what it does and where it comes from is this balance about where your feeling of control lies. And and you need to have a balance of that sort of what's called the locus of control. You know, where do you believe things happen to you, or do you believe you do things in the world, right? um, and it's got to be that balance, because what you want to do is have it be um, your belief about your ability to impact things is enough that you believe you can do something about what's happening, right? You can do something about your migraine. You can make those lifestyle changes, see the doctors, get treatments, go through and do things that will help. But at the same time, not so much feeling of control that it feels like everything that goes wrong is your fault. And because there's no amount of all of these things that make the condition go away, right? We all still have migraine, and so what I've found is that anytime that I'm not feeling resilient, it's when I have fallen to one side or another of that balance, because it could go either direction.
Great. And Kerrie, what about you?
Well, to build on what Hart was talking about, I think that when people talk about triggers, we can really get caught up in, well, what triggered this migraine attack, and thinking every single migraine attack you can find a trigger for. And that gets you down, as Hart was saying, like that takes you off on to the wrong direction, where you start blaming yourself. And I think self-blame is the antithesis of resilience. And I found that sort of the emotional resilience and working on how I'm feeling about migraine, how I'm approaching my life, how I'm coping, having that strength is what then gives me the ability to find treatment. If I am just so sick, and certainly there have been times where I'm just so sick and so despondent that I'm not trying new treatments. But if I'm working on my resilience, then I'm able to keep trying a new thing and having a plan going forward. Like I found actually it's kind of a reciprocal thing where something that feeds my resilience is having that plan that I mentioned, to have, okay, I'm trying this treatment now. If this treatment doesn't work, then I'll try this. I always have a plan B. I usually have a plan C or a plan D as well, just so I know that there's something up ahead. And then that actually then feeds my resilience and makes me feel like I'm more able to cope. I'm more able to deal with the ups and downs of what I'm going through right now.
That's great. So Kerrie, what are some self-care resilience strategies that you personally find most helpful? And then we'll have Hart answer the same question.
So I do some of the big things that you hear about. You know, I try to exercise as much as possible. I love being outside, so I try to get out and go for walks. I cook healthful food. Sort of those are kind of the bigger more time consuming things. I make sure I have time for myself, but I do a lot of what I think of like quick self-care, the smaller things that I integrate into my everyday life. Like I don't just drink a cup of coffee. I make sure that I savor at least the first sip. I look out the window and I enjoy what's around me. I try to be present. I try to enjoy, even Hart mentioned the pandemic, and you know, we're still in the middle of that as we're recording. I even started a practice of savoring the feeling of washing my hands. So it's not like bigger self-care things that take a lot of time. It's not getting a massage. It's not taking a bubble bath. It's really incorporating these things that nourish me into my everyday life. And then part of that is also doing things or not doing things that stress me out. So setting boundaries and trying to be, I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. So you were saying setting boundaries, and that I'll just jump onto that, because I think saying no has been an incredibly powerful part of my self-care. I didn't used to think I could say no. It's like if somebody asked me something, I had to say yes, or I had to figure out how to accommodate them. And that is not always helpful to me. And it's certainly not always within my ability level, just in terms of my energy and time. So if that's at all helpful for you to pick up where you were,
Yeah,
I fully support
great.
that.
Yeah, and actually, as part of saying no, that's another part of the boundary, and that feels like some of the biggest self-care, because I'm not overcommitting. And if there's something I want to say yes to, but I'm not sure that I can, I will tell people I can get back to them, or I will get back to them. I've gotten really good at just not automatically committing, even if I want to, just to step back and think, okay, can I do this? Does this fit in? Because otherwise I wind up sort of spiraling out of control. And if I get that stress, then my migraine attacks get worse. And then I'm not happy with whatever it is I committed to do. Like I'm not happy with my work, which then stresses me out more. And it's a slippery slope.
For sure. And how about you, Hart?
Well, Kerrie mentioned a couple of things that really are at the core for me. And the first is, just trying to maintain any kind of balance between all the different things that are going on. I find that very important. And so finding the time for little things that make me, that sort of recharge me. So playing a board game with friends, or, reading some fiction or something like that, finding time whenever possible to do those things. And then when Kerrie was talking about the savoring, I think that that's a big piece of, in fact, probably the core piece of my own practice for resilience, which is around mindfulness. And so I try to meditate ideally every day, but at least, a few times a week as the core of that mindfulness practice. But I find that just being aware of what's happening around me and in my own body and mind helps tremendously for then how I react to it, and what I can do about that when it comes on. And so, back even to when we talk about that balance of where my control comes from, inside or outside, can I do something about it? Or is it, being mindful helps me stay more in that sweet spot of, I've got this migraine coming on. I might think about, well, did something trigger it? But I'll be much less likely to blame myself for, oh, I shouldn't have done that thing, or things like that. And so, and I've found really that meditation practice, once I started, it's hard to describe, but that on a regular basis, I sort of, drift away from it a little bit, and then I notice the difference and come back. So.
Yeah, 100%. I do 10 minutes a day, and it's amazing to me how much it's changed just my whole way of being in the world. And you just wouldn't think 10 minutes a day would make any difference at all, really. But it really, I definitely, if I don't do it, I can feel sort of off kilter all day. I don't have as much patience. I don't just have as much ability to sort of roll with things. So for sure, it's a big strategy that I use. So this question wasn't on your list, so you could take a moment to think about it if I'm throwing you for a loop. But you're the first husband-wife team I've interviewed, and maybe the only one, I don't know. And you also both experience migraine. So Hart, because you're not chronic, I would think you would sometimes are falling into the role of caregiver, but possibly vice versa. How does that? I'm assuming that you encourage each other and you support each other in your self-care strategies, but how does that sort of play out on a day-to-day or weekly basis with the two of you? I'm just curious.
I mean, the day-to-day or weekly basis really depends on how severe at the time Kerrie's chronic migraine is, right? How bad it is, because it's varied so much over the years. I think that mostly it's we are always trying to communicate about where she is and what's happening, where I might need or want to step in to do something extra that wouldn't be part of my normal routine because of how she's doing. And then, all the way up to when she was at her worst, it was very much more caretaking. And I've always said, though, that it's like one of the things that has helped that work is that I at least have the experience of having migraine. And so I can't really understand or imagine what it would be like to have that going on all the time or nearly all the time, like it has been for Kerrie. Again, especially at the worst times, but I at least have a frame of reference. And so that I think has been very helpful for me personally. Yeah, and just.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I was mainly asking because there's a lot of, I mean, more women have migraine than men, it's about 75%. So there are probably a lot of straight couples who are in the situation where the husband doesn't have the experience, but ends up being in a caretaking role. And so do you have any advice for people in that situation that you've learned or you feel like it's been really helpful? And then Kerrie, feel free to jump in with anything you want to share.
I mean, I think that it's like so many other things, just actually talking about what's happening and what is and is not hard or difficult or painful, and trying to carve out that space to have those conversations, and then also to make sure that whoever is in the caregiver role doesn't need to feel like they are always there, right? That they have some other space that they can be in or go to, or, you know, people to be with or something, so that that's not the entirety of their experience. And then also making sure, similarly in that sort of carving out space, make sure that there's space so that your relationship doesn't become entirely about caregiving, right? That there are other things there that you find whatever can bring you some joy together, even when one of you is at their sickest.
Yeah, great. Kerrie, do you have any thoughts on that?
Hart mentioned talking about things, and I think that that is really key. There was a long time where I felt so bad that I was sick all the time and that affected his life, and he felt bad that I was sick all the time. And so we were sort of preemptively trying to make things better for the other person without actually talking to them and finding out what was bothering them. And so I was feeling guilty about a lot of things that I just didn't need to worry about. And Hart similarly was worrying about things with me that he didn't need to worry about. But it was almost like each of us we were trying to cover all of the bases, and really we just needed to talk about it and find out, no, this is what's really bothering me. So I think that that's really key.
That's great. Thank you so much. Kerrie and Hart, thank you again for being here today and sharing your story. Learn more about their company at TheraSpecs.com, like therapeutic specs, spectacles. You can read Kerrie on migraine.com and follow her on Twitter at TDHblog. That's the Daily Headache blog, TDH. And check out other episodes of the Resilient series on Facebook Watch, IGTV, and YouTube. Follow me at SWeaverMPH to learn more about my upcoming book, The Migraine Relief Plan Cookbook, which is due out in spring 2022 from Surrey Books. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and thanks for being here. Bye.